The soft clink of a silver spoon against crystal glass echoed faintly through the room where chandeliers cast their glow onto designer gowns and crocodile leather handbags worth a year's tuition. Amid the cold scent of power and luxury perfume, a voice rang out, casual yet cutting, "Something smells." Inexpensive. The words didn't need repeating. They spread like an oil stain across the marble floor, instantly chilling the air. All eyes turned to the woman seated at the far end of the table, the only one not wearing a Chanel blazer, not sporting burgundy lipstick, not flaunting a Swiss timepiece. Just a plain white blouse with frayed hems and soft worn leather sandals. Ava Sinclair sat there quiet, like a detail that didn't fit in the overly staged composition of the Mandarin Society Academy. A young mother leaned forward and whispered just loud enough for the whole room to hear while pretending it was unintentional. Maybe she thought this was the janitor's orientation. Laughter followed, soft, polite, but laced with mockery, like crystal glasses gently toasting to someone else's disgrace. Ava said nothing. She simply rested her hand on a thin, weathered notebook filled with meticulously written notes in elegant, slanted, cursive proposals for scholarships for underprivileged students, the kind of children no one in that room had ever mentioned. She was used to this cold stares, sugar-coated cruelty, the indifference of people too accustomed to owning everything except compassion. But today, something had shifted. Not in them, in Ava. She knew she didn't have to reply. She just had to wait. Because in a few hours, the woman mocked for her old blouse and nameless shoes would step into a chrome-black Rolls-Royce Phantom, and every scornful glance would dissolve into the most uncomfortable silence they had ever experienced, the silence of realizing you were wrong far too late. If you've ever been judged by your appearance, ever been pushed to the corners of the room for not glittering enough, then this story is for you. Stay here. Don't look away. Because in the next part, Ava will do what no one else in that room had the courage to do: speak up for someone else. The meeting carried on as if no one had just been humiliated for smelling like fabric hand-washed instead of dry-cleaned. The women around the table eagerly presented plans for this year's gala, a lavish event to be held on the 52nd floor of the Aurum Hotel, where a single glass of champagne costs more than a family's entire dinner. One proposed flying in an orchestra from Vienna. Another talked about Italian-imported crystal lighting. Meanwhile, the PTA president, Genevieve Langston, spoke about a six-figure budget to build a private VIP lounge for the primary sponsors. Ava had been sitting quietly for nearly an hour, listening, observing, occasionally jotting notes into her notebook. But when a budget chart appeared on screen and the words $14,000, imported orchid centerpieces, flashed across like a declaration that beauty only mattered if it came with a price tag, Ava looked up. She took a deep breath. In the background, someone giggled lightly while discussing custom-fitted gowns. Then Ava spoke. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but could we possibly allocate a small portion of the budget for scholarships? There are students genuinely struggling to stay enrolled here. Even a little support could change their entire future." The room fell silent. But it wasn't the kind of silence that came from listening. It was the kind that preceded a wave, a hush filled with judgment. An influencer, toying with her Hermes bracelet, glanced at Ava and smirked, as if watching a child try to speak at a shareholders' meeting. Genevieve looked up from a perfumed printout, her eyes narrowing, though her smile remained eerily composed. "We'll prioritize the entertainment first," she said, her tone not loud but sharp enough to slice hope in half. "This is Mandarin society. We must maintain the school's image. If we start cutting corners on decor or performances, it sends the wrong message to potential families. No one objected. But no one agreed either. The room slipped back into the kind of stillness Ava knew too well, a silence not born from lack of words, but from the collective decision that her words weren't worth responding to. Ava gave a slight nod. No argument, no defense. She simply gripped her pen a little tighter. The pen didn't break, but her heart did. Ava lowered her head, pretending to jot something into her notebook, though the strokes were meaningless, just a way to keep her hand from trembling, to make it seem like she was focused, unbothered, still in control. But just when she thought she could slip past the moment without leaving a trace, from the far end of the table, where the chandelier lights glinted off a gold-plated phone belonging to a rising influencer, a whisper floated out low enough to avoid rebuke, yet sharp enough to pierce straight through Ava. Poor thing probably thinks this is how these events actually work, the woman said, her giggle trailing behind like a thin line of poison. Her husband ever fund anything bigger than a yard sale? This time, Ava didn't pretend to write. She put the pen down gently, tightening her grip on the notebook, as if without that pressure, everything she had worked to keep steady inside would come crashing to the floor. She didn't turn around, didn't reply, didn't even glance back. But inside, she felt her blood heat up, then go cold in a matter of seconds. Shame, helplessness, hurt. Not because they called her poor, but because they truly believed that kindness and simplicity were signs of failure. They didn't know, they couldn't possibly know, that the man they assumed couldn't fund more than a garage sale was the very force behind half of the city's largest investment ventures. The man they had admired just last month on the cover of Forbes without ever knowing he had a wife named Ava. Because Ava never needed her husband's name to define her worth. She had chosen to step back, to raise her children on home-cooked meals, to spend her time volunteering without applause, to be present in a world where people only showed up when the cameras did. And in that very moment, Ava knew her silence was the loudest slap. No need to shout, just stand, and stand tall. The afternoon settled softly over the grounds of Mandarin society like a pale golden ribbon. Children spilled out from the grand gates. Their laughter echoing, backpacks swinging, everything looked exactly like any elite academy, peaceful, expensive, and so orderly it felt sterile. Ava Sinclair sat quietly on a stone bench near the entrance, legs crossed, phone in hand, as she read a message from her daughter's teacher. The fading light brushed across her hair, making the strands of silver shimmer like fine silk. She still wore that same white blouse, the same worn leather sandals, nothing flashy, but her eyes had changed. Still, deep, steady. Then came the sound, slow, resonant, not hurried like a sports car, not showy like a security convoy, just the quiet arrival of real power. The chrome-black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided past the school gates like a ghost in a tailored suit. Silent, but it made everyone stop speaking. The students paused. Parents whispered. The security guard tugged nervously at his uniform. Two drivers in tailored black suits stepped out, one approaching the rear door, the other sweeping the grounds with a gaze so precise it sent a chill down the spine. The mothers who'd sat across from Ava in meetings still hadn't realized. They frowned, exchanged glances. Some guessed it might be a Hollywood actor, or maybe the mayor making a surprise visit. They didn't know. Not yet. Then Ava's daughter appeared, clutching a hand-colored drawing, grinning as she called out. Mommy Ava stood, waved gently. And when the chauffeur opened the car door, bowing with the kind of elegance reserved for royalty, he said, Mrs. Sinclair, the car is ready for you and your daughter. Just one sentence, just one gesture, but enough to topple the entire hierarchy they had built around her for so long. Genevieve Langston, the woman who once commanded the room from the head of the table, slowed her steps, lips parting, but unable to form words. The influencer who had mocked Ava stood frozen, phone in hand, forgetting to press record. And the mothers who once whispered about Ava's husband only affording yard sales now hid behind oversized sunglasses, their faces pale as if the sunlight itself were burning them alive. Ava took her daughter's hand and walked toward the car. Not quickly, not theatrically, as if she had done this her entire life. She didn't smile, didn't glance at anyone, didn't need to say a word. But her steps, quiet and unwavering, were the only answer they would never forget. No titles, no explanations. No need to shout, "I deserve this." She only needed to exist, with a dignity no one could buy, to make the entire schoolyard fall silent. And for the first time, it was the judges who had nothing left to say. Just as Ava opened the car door for her daughter to climb in, a figure emerged from inside the vehicle, tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, not a single thread out of place. His face looked oddly familiar to some, especially to those who followed the front pages of financial magazines, but they didn't dare believe it, couldn't believe it. Ethan Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Global Holdings, the man who held controlling shares in multiple banks, real estate empires, and yes, Mandarin Society Academy. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. His name had once been spoken with reverence. Today he was here not as a benefactor, but as the husband of the poor woman in the old blouse. He stepped out, his gaze sweeping across the schoolyard like a slow, silent reckoning. He wasn't angry. He wasn't theatrical. Just calm, so calm it was unnerving. And that look, when it landed on each face that had laughed at his wife the day before, made them bow their heads as if staring into a mirror too honest to bear. Then he stopped, standing beside Ava, placing one hand gently on her back, a gesture of respect that needed no introduction. And then he spoke, just one sentence. "Thank you for taking such an interest in my wife and daughter. I truly value people who know how to be kind. To the mother of my child." No threats, no direct accusations, but the words struck like a verdict. In that moment, every false smile, every snide comment, every judgmental glance was dragged into the daylight and incinerated by the weight of that silence. Genevieve Langston, once the arbiter of parental elegance, took a step back. The Cartier necklace around her neck suddenly felt unbearably heavy. The influencer collapsed onto a nearby bench face, pale, still clutching her phone, but too stunned to press record. The other mothers, who had once whispered behind Ava's back, now looked at each other, then lowered their eyes as though being judged by their own pettiness. Ava simply stood there, no victorious smile. "No, I told you so." She turned to her husband and gave a quiet nod. And that made her the most powerful person in the schoolyard, not because she had power, but because she didn't need to use it to prove anything at all. The next morning, the main meeting room at Mandarin Society no longer gleamed with the same smug elegance. The silk tablecloths had been replaced chairs, straightened glasses filled as if to cover up something quietly spreading across the room, an unnamed fear among those who once ruled this space like queens of a gilded realm. Genevieve Langston arrived first. Gone was her usual platinum showpiece dress, replaced by a neutral high-collared design, her hair neatly pinned back, and a faint smile that failed to hide the tension in her eyes. She didn't speak much, just kept glancing toward the door as if afraid the person she was waiting for might not show up at all. Then Ava walked in. Same white blouse, same worn leather sandals, same everyday canvas backpack. But this time, the entire room stood up when she entered. No one told them to. It wasn't protocol. It was reflex. She sat at the edge of the table like she always did, but this time she didn't lower her head. She didn't have to do anything because her quiet presence had become a kind of silent scepter they all bowed to. Genevieve cleared her throat, her voice, the one she once used to control boardrooms, now faintly trembling. Ava, I want to offer an apology on behalf of the council for everything. We were wrong. But more than that, we want to say we truly admire your sincerity. And, if you would accept, we'd like to invite you to become the director of our new scholarship initiative, one inspired by you. Some nodded. Others murmured agreement, a repentant chorus. The same ones who had once called her cheap, who had scoffed at yard sales, now praised her as a symbol of renewal. But Ava only gave a slight nod, her eyes still on the words in her notebook. She let them speak, all of them. Then in a silence no one dared interrupt, she looked up. Her gaze was steady, direct, but not harsh, and she spoke. I'm grateful for the apology, and for the offer, but I'll have to decline. The room tensed. Genevieve froze. I didn't come here for a title. I'm just a mother who wants her child to learn. In a school where kindness isn't treated like a weakness. I don't need applause. I don't need my name on any plaque. I just need to know that other children won't have to stay silent the way I once did. The silence that followed was no longer the hush of ridicule. It was the stillness of people realizing they'd been wrong and standing before someone they would never have had the courage to become themselves. Genevieve nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the greatest defeat of her life, a defeat at the hands of a woman who didn't raise her voice, didn't retaliate, but still changed everything. After that meeting, no one called Ava Sinclair the ordinary mother anymore. They didn't dare. In fact, it no longer seemed necessary. Because what Ava had done, not through title, but through action, forced Mandarin society to re-examine itself. Every gesture, every rule, every subtle bias that had silently eroded kindness day by day. Within 3 weeks, the school once known for its rigid standards of prestige began to shift. Not because of a flashy press conference, not due to a new round of funding, but because of something far more fragile and far more sacred: dignity, the very thing they had nearly lost. The new semester's opening ceremony was simpler. No $1,000 buffet, no banner showcasing top contributing parents. Instead, something unprecedented. The keynote speech was delivered by a scholarship student, a child who had nearly been denied admission for being unsuitable for a high society environment. And the moment that brought tears to people's eyes was when that child closed their speech with a single line: I don't know who Ava's mum is, but because of her, I get to stand here today. At the back of the audience, Ava stood among the crowd, not on a stage, no spotlight, yet every eye turned toward her. No one told them to, no one trained them to, but it happened anyway, because true respect cannot be demanded. It's built from small, consistent acts done without applause. Genevieve Langston, who once led the parent council with glances and designer bags, now stood beside Ava, head bowed, as applause rang out for the child. She didn't say much anymore, but the way her hands tightened on the edge of the podium was her way of admitting she had just learned the most valuable lesson of her life. Teachers began admitting students for their potential and perseverance, not based on sponsorship lists. Kids who used to shrink away because their shoes weren't the right brand now stood at the front of the class, speaking without fear. A small sign was placed in the main hallway. No diamonds, no mention of Ava's name. Just one simple sentence. Kindness is the first standard for entering this place. No one knew who wrote it. No one rushed to take credit. because everyone knew it was Ava who planted the seed, with her unwavering silence and a heart that refused to give up. If you've ever doubted whether one ordinary person can change an entire system, Ava Sinclair is your answer. No microphone, no title, no official power. Just one thing, the courage to live with kindness, even when kindness makes you the first to be left out. As the early autumn sunlight touched the second-floor window panes of the penthouse beside Bryant Park, the soft sound of a piano drifted from the living room, a gentle tune Ethan often played on quiet weekend mornings. Ava stepped out of the kitchen, holding a steaming cup of chamomile tea, dressed in simple loungewear. No meetings today, no deadlines, no judgmental stares when passing the school gates. On the oak table by the window sat her daughter, Elise, drawing. It was a picture for a school assignment titled "The Happiest Day of My Life." Ava leaned over to take a look. The drawing showed three people, a mother holding her daughter's hand, a father smiling beside them, and in the background, a sign that read, "Every child deserves to be loved." Ava paused for a moment, not because the drawing was perfect, but because of the wobbly handwriting in the bottom right corner. "Thank you, Mom, for not giving up." Elise had no idea that there were nights when she and her mother had to eat expired bread because tuition was too high. She didn't know about the mornings Ava cried quietly in the bathroom so no one would hear after being told that someone like her doesn't belong at Mandarin society. She broke down, but never broke apart. She was pushed back, but never stepped away. And today, she stood where she was not, because someone granted her a place, but because she held on to kindness long enough for the world to make room for it. Ethan entered, carrying a plate of freshly baked pastries. He set them down beside Ava, then sat quietly beside her. They didn't need to say anything, because sometimes love doesn't lie in repeated "I love yous," but in silent presence, unperformed, unproven, unwavering. Ava rested her head on his shoulder. She looked out the window, where the sky stretched endlessly blue without a single cloud. Below, people moved quickly, rushing like she once did years ago. But inside her now, there was no noise, no lingering question, "Am I enough?" Only peace. Deep, vast, and complete. She pulled out the old notebook from the drawer, the one that had stayed with her from the moment she was humiliated at the school gates to the day she turned down the spotlight. On the first page, the handwriting still trembled slightly. "Tomorrow I'll keep going. I don't need to be understood. I just need to keep believing." Ava smiled, then quietly added a new line. "Today the world is learning how to be kind. Simply because I never stopped." Perhaps the most beautiful thing Ava Sinclair's story leaves behind is not the triumphant victory, not the stunning comeback, nor even the moment she made an entire boardroom fall silent in shame, but the fact that after everything, she still kept her kindness intact. In a world that worships titles and trades human worth for salaries or status, Ava chose the hardest path. She didn't scream, didn't retaliate, didn't seek revenge. She simply kept walking and let time speak for her. She was humiliated, dismissed, and underestimated, but she never let the cruelty of others define who she was. She taught us that kindness is never weakness, that some victories don't come from power, but from refusing to abandon yourself when no one else believes in you. And that truly is the brightest kind of light. I believe the deepest lesson doesn't lie in her restored reputation, but in her quiet choice to preserve compassion in a world that finds it so easy to grow cold. Because the bravest people are not those who strike back, but those who still choose to forgive, even after they've been hurt. If this story made you see even a small part of yourself in Ava. Hold on to that. And if you believe there's someone out there who needs this story to find a bit more courage to keep holding on to their goodness in a world that often punishes it, please share it. Like it. Leave a comment. Tell your own story. And most of all, subscribe to Toch Story. Here, we don't tell stories to make noise. We tell them to move their hearts. And if today you're searching for a reason to believe that kindness still exists, Ava is your answer.